Fantastic reality. A humorous publication about physicists and esotericists. Continuation. Part 2. Funny stories about real-thinking physicists and free-thinking esotericists. And now, in order to tune your consciousness to something cheerful and positive, I have written a continuation of the humorous story about the irreconcilability of the positions of physicists and esotericists, although both should work together to achieve the common goal of the development of the entire civilization located on planet Earth. In this publication, one can see the irreconcilability of the positions of physicists who believe in exact sciences that require confirmation and proof, with the position of esotericists who believe in spiritual teachings and magic. Differences in positions between physicists and esotericists can turn into intolerance. Physicists will more easily agree that everything in the cosmos happens by itself, without any explanation and participation of any mind, especially the higher, and even more so God, and even more so in the likeness. Because for realists, physicists, it will already be too much. Physicists are wary of aliens flying on their saucers, and they do not tolerate sorcerers, witches, and esotericists. They especially do not tolerate esotericists, because these can give out something after which the astral bodies will already appear everywhere, so you can't just brush them off with a clapper to knock the dust out of the carpet. Physicists would rather listen to the representative of the church, knowing what can be expected of him. But not the esotericist, who can tell about the existence of various types of energies, and about the astral bodily shells surrounding a person, while touching on science in passing. Of course, in their understanding, from which the last precious hair of the people of science physicists begins to stand on end. I myself was a witness to what was happening, which happened at one lecture. Of course, I knew that the lecturer speaking at the lecture was an esotericist, of some high rank, I don't remember now which one, and those people who were sitting in the hall and listening to the esotericist telling them something, were different people, and the fact that the lecturer was an esotericist, a magician of the 5th generation, of course, did not know that the lecturer was an esotericist, a magician of the 5th generation. I left the hall for a while, and then, after a while, I returned and realized who was sitting in the hall. Some of the people sitting in the hall had their eyes wide open, slowly crawling out of their sockets, and others in the hall had their hair standing on end. As I realized later, they were all physicists who confused the audience, and they did not get to a lecture on the fission of hydrogen atoms, but fell into the clutches of an esotericist who simply spoke, touching on various topics, transferring the consciousness of listeners to where they did not even think of going. The listeners present in the hall experienced and expressed complete indignation, accompanied by the twitching of their heads in the initial, introductory phase of the lecture, which did not say anything concrete at once, so that before the influence of esoteric hypnosis, no one could jump out of the hall and run away. The physicists were sitting in the hall, in their seats, chained by some unknown force to the seats of their chairs, and they could not move, and they could not just get up, and they could not leave yet because of what had collapsed and encroached on all their existing fundamentals, in which the physicists had blindly believed all their conscious lives, until today. The physicists were in the hall, under a general collective, esoteric hypnosis, ready to do whatever they were ordered to do, who had subjugated their will, who knew his business quite well, like a boa constrictor, hypnotizing a group of monkeys with his gaze, voluntarily and with a song, walking into his mouth. In the same way, the esotericist did his familiar sorcery, penetrating deeply into the brains of the physicists sitting in the hall, unsuspecting in the hall, who devoted their entire life, based on formulas, laboratory research and evidence, to science. One of the scientists in the physics hall realized something was wrong, probably the dean of some university, who had not believed in God at all until that day, using an unthinkable effort of his last willpower, squeezed out of himself, "My God, why?" Physicists silently, like fish lying on the shore, opened and closed their mouths, rolling their eyes at the information that penetrated into their ears, hoping to capture with their gills at least something that would allow them to continue to live and remain in this world for the time being. Of course, if the physicists sitting in the audience knew that they could easily defend themselves and close themselves off from any nonsense that tries to enter their brains, along with the hypnotic, nasty voice of the esoteric lecturer, you just need to create 4 crosses, using your fingers, putting your ring fingers on your index fingers, on both hands and feet, and sit like that for a while, thereby forming a protective invisible energy dome around his person, who understands where this person has gone. Imagine a doctor of science sitting with crosses made with his fingers on his hands and feet. Introduced? Those who use this protective technique, who know where the wind blows, would then protect their consciousness from the penetrating nonsense coming from the slanders, a person who possesses conversational magic, who is trying to get into the brains of his interlocutors, and systematically draw out all their energy from them, beforehand, thoroughly mixing, in their skulls. Physicists who were forced to sit and listen to the esotericist, opening their mouths in surprise and all their open chakras, unprotected due to inexperience, which they had formed at that time and opened at the same time. Of course, the physicists did not know how to organize an energetic protective shell around themselves, because they had enough of the fact that they were proving theorems day after day, constantly thinking about the influence of the magnetic force field that exists in a vacuum. Mentally and practically, in the Hadron Collider, microparticles were accelerated in order to record the consequences of their collision at high speeds. But the physicists could not protect themselves from the fact that information pouring into their ears, paralyzing their unprotected brains, did not penetrate into their consciousness, from the esotericist, instilling his philosophy of existence on the physicists. And all these physicists sitting in the hall, probably with scientific degrees, turned into defenseless rabbits who fell into the clutches of the wolf esotericist, who knows his business well, knows no mercy. A good esotericist, with a hanging tongue, without experiencing any problems, can draw out all the energy available to unprotected physicists who react to what an esotericist who knows his business will say. Physicists have only one salvation: to escape from the field of continuous influence of the esotericist, who, with his thoughts, has fettered all the motor reflexes of the physicists caught and taken by surprise, conducting his own esoteric experiments on them. The physicists sitting in the hall resembled guinea pigs shaking with fear, moving their legs. It was seen how the physicists sitting in the hall clenched their fists, trembling from overexertion, in order to rush into the last and decisive battle, and slam the esotericist in the face, for all those psychological traumas that were inflicted by the merciless esotericist, who brought the unprotected brains of scientists to a boil. Forgetting about decency, and about the defense of doctoral dissertations, as something no longer necessary, faded into the background, where in the foreground, flaunted the impudent face of the esotericist, who encroached on the sacred in science, which he wanted to reach and crash into, with all the remaining physical strength, which was rapidly leaving the bodies of thoroughly tortured physicists. The information systematically implanted by the esotericist, intolerable by the physicists, now caused the physicists to have fits accompanied by esoteric laughter. Something unimaginable was happening in the hall. Physicists in a state of mass esoteric hypnosis now just sat and laughed through clenched teeth at everything that happened in the hall, because of the inability to move their limbs. It is strange that if in the hall there were not physicists, but, say, representatives of the church, then the esotericist would not be able to somehow influence the minds of listeners who believe in the Holy Trinity. And do you know why? Because, scientifically speaking, identically charged particles try never to get closer. Have you ever seen joint lectures that touch on common topics that require discussion and participation of esotericists and representatives of the church? Personally, I have not heard of such people, and I have not seen them. Although scientists, including physicists, meet with representatives of the church, because they know what can be expected from them. But lectures with the participation of physicists and esotericists are not held. Because all these joint lectures can definitely end in a big fight, in the same place where they will be held, without any doubt, definitely. Despite the intelligence of the audience and their venerable age. Also, scientifically speaking, it follows that esotericists and representatives of the church have the same potential of their charge. And therefore, they avoid speaking about something, in the presence of one or the other. They blurted out something, or muttered and quickly scattered, like two particles with the same charges. For esotericists, physics, with their worldview, is like a tidbit. Speaking again in scientific language, it is like two differently polar sources that are ready to get closer and annihilate each other, with a large release of energy, with a high probability. Only an esotericist knows when he needs to jump out in order to take everything he needs and avoid the consequences of an annihilation explosion. Annihilation is the annihilation of two bipolar sources. In this battle, the esotericists, who know how to make blocks for receiving information, will definitely win, and the physicists can only hate them fiercely. Each of them is in his own worldview, carries it with him, ready to dump his worldview on the interlocutor, not even thinking about the fact that different people tend to have their own views, their hobbies, without clogging their brains with other information, even if necessary. From the author. Although scientists, and specifically physicists and esotericists, as well as representatives of the Church, should work together on the development of the entire civilization on the planet, to achieve harmony between matter and energy existing in the world. Because, in the end, it is one common thing that is currently divided, and in order to know the truth, the knowledge of the physicists about matter, and the knowledge of the esotericists about energy, must be combined. This will happen only when there is a demand for broad knowledge that unites matter and energy in order to make it possible to approach the truth. Without combining this knowledge, it will be impossible to do this. Fantastic Reality. A humorous publication about physicists and esotericists. Continuation. Part 2. Funny stories about real-thinking physicists and free-thinking esotericists. Author of the publication, Anatoly Sem. March 4, 2026.